Hello, Brun Chilton here, founder of Bellator Christi Ministries, found at bellatorchristi.com, co-host of the Bellator Christi podcast, and author of the Layman's Manual on Christian Apologetics. I've been in pastoral ministry for nearly 20 years and currently serve as a clinical hospice chaplain, providing emotional and spiritual comfort to those facing death. Today I join K-Paul in Contact Mission in discussing the fascinating topic of Ndes, otherwise known as near-death experiences. The term was first coined by French psychologist and epistemologist Victor Egger in the 1890s, termed an expérience de mort imminente, or an experience of imminent death. A near-death experience occurs when a person dies and has conscious experiences outside and beyond the body. These experiences may include observations of the room, building, and location in which the person's body is found. The experience often includes seeing a bright light, feelings of peace and serenity, meeting God and religious figures, and being greeted by deceased family members. People often report having extrasensory abilities that are currently unavailable, such as seeing colors not found on earth, and the experience of timelessness, among other abilities. To be classified as an NDE, these conscious occurrences happen after the person is declared clinically dead. Another similar experience to the NDE is what's called the OBE, or out-of-body experience. OBEs are like NDEs in that the person experiences conscious events outside of the physical body. However, OBEs may not always accompany death encounters. Some have reported experiencing OBEs during meditative practices and even drug-induced states. The main difference between NDEs and OBEs is that the person is declared dead during an NDE event, whereas OBEs occur while the body still has life. The popular story of 4-year-old Colton Burpo's trip to heaven, as found in the book Heaven is for Real, is an example of an OBE because Colton was not officially deceased during the event. His heavenly experiences happened while on an operating table. OBEs are extremely interesting and hold significant value. The objective impact of NDEs, though, outweigh OBEs. However, both hold value in demonstrating the existence of an afterlife and what's called substant dualism. Humans maintain a physical and spiritual essence. The absence of brainwaves in NDE experiences afford an added layer of evidential proof against claims of hallucinations that OBEs cannot provide. Additionally, reports of OBEs tend to provide more anecdotal data than objective evidence. For that reason, our investigation focuses on NDEs rather than OBEs. One of the most consistent objections to NDEs is that such accounts offer more anecdotal subjectives rather than objective facts. Paul Kurtz, responding to Raymond Moody, says, "There is no reliable evidence that people who report such experiences have died and returned, or that consciousness exists separate from the brain or body." Is Kurtz right in his assessment? If so, our whole time together is for naught. Thankfully, NDEs stand on solid footing. Let us consider some lines of objective evidence supporting NDEs after first explaining the preference for objective evidence over subjective varieties. Objective evidence is that which can be confirmed outside of personal experience, whereas subjective evidence depends on the trustworthiness of personal testimony. For instance, if a person claims to have almost run into a fallen oak tree on the road, their claim can be confirmed by external factors. Others could see the wood, leaves, and debris from the fallen tree. Perhaps one would even find the trunk which formerly held the tree in place. Broken ground and objects destroyed by the tree could serve as corroborating evidence. Likewise, NDEs can be confirmed by external evidence observed by the conscious, disembodied observer, which can also be corroborated by conscious, embodied observers. So, for instance, if person A claims to have died and seen a pencil lying on top of a cabinet in their disembodied state, person B can check to corroborate or deny person A's claim. This provides some strength. But if person A claims to have seen a pencil on top of a cabinet, heard the conversation that a family member had in another room, and described seeing a deceased loved one whom person A had never met, then the case for person A's NDE increases. NDEs can be accepted as authentic events by 5 lines of objective evidence provided by numerous case studies. 1. Verifying objects outside of the body. Numerous people who have had NDE events describe seeing objects while outside their body. In some cases, they observe objects which could have never been seen from their perspective while lying on a gurney or operating table. For instance, Kimberly Clark Sharp tells the story of a lady named Maria who experienced an NDE during her first visit to Seattle, Washington. While at Harborview Hospital in Seattle, Maria told Sharp that she had an NDE in which she viewed a blue tennis shoe on the ledge of the hospital's 3rd floor around the corner from which she had first entered the facility. It was impossible to view the shoe from the ground, and even difficult, quite frankly, to view from the air. Maria described a worn place on the toe of the shoe and lace found under the heel of the shoe. All of the details of Maria's observation concerning the blue shoe were confirmed by Sharp, who was actually skeptical of NDE events. 2. Verifying events outside of the body. Events that could have never otherwise been known have been reported by some experiencing NDEs. In one humorous case, a young lady left her body and visited her relatives in the waiting room. She overheard her brother-in-law, who was quite obnoxious, saying that he was going to wait to see if she was going to, quote-unquote, kick the bucket. After her recovery, she confronted her brother-in-law about his calloused remarks, which most assuredly left him in shock. 3. Verifying places outside of the body. One report describes the events surrounding an NDE of an 11-year-old boy who suffered a cardiac arrest while in the hospital. He had no heartbeat for at least 20 minutes. During his 20 minutes without a heartbeat, the young boy described himself as watching the events of the emergency room from the ceiling. After his recovery, he was able to accurately convey the medical procedures the doctors and nurses performed, the colors of the instruments in the ER, and where they even could be found. He identified the medical personnel's genders and even recounted their discussions. All of the boy's reports were confirmed by the medical staff. 4. Vision in people who were born blind. In a 2008 study, Kenneth Ring interviewed 21 blind people who described confirmed visual experiences during their NDE events, 14 of whom were blind from birth. Ring's peer-reviewed study supported the following 4 conclusions. 1. NDEs are the same for individuals who are blind or visually impaired as they are for those who can physically see. 2. Blind and visually impaired persons describe the same kind of visual perceptions as the visually unimpaired. 3. Some of these reports can be validated by outside witnesses. And 4. Preliminary evidence corroborates that visual experiences do occur in NDE experiences. 5. Conscious experiences when brain dead. Dr. Eben Alexander is a medical doctor who served as an academic neurosurgeon for over 25 years. Alexander was left in a coma due to his diagnosis of bacterial meningitis. Most interestingly, while he experienced the events of his NDE, only the most primitive parts of his brain, termed the housekeeping parts, were operating. The portions of the brain that stores memories, observations, and is associated with hallucinations were all gone and non-functioning. For all intent and purposes, Alexander's NDE discounts any proposed theory associating NDEs with hallucinations in all cases. But what do we do with the biblical evidence? Well, interestingly, some of the biggest pushback against NDEs often comes from the Christian community. Even some well-renowned preachers doubt the validity of NDEs because of misinterpretations of biblical texts and misunderstandings of NDEs themselves. 3 passages of Scripture authenticate the possibility of NDEs. 1, Paul's visit to the third heaven. It may shock individuals to consider that the Apostle Paul records his own account of an NDE. In 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 10, Paul discusses his NDE by speaking of himself in the third person. Notice that he mentions that he was taken to the third heaven, indicating that he left the earth, the universe, and was taken into God's abode. Paul's experiences of heaven left him puzzled and amazed. He realizes that he may have been out of the body, yet he heard words that he could only describe as inexpressible in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 4. It is also in 2 Corinthians where Paul reflects on his desire to be absent from the body and at home or present with the Lord in 2 Corinthians 5:8, possibly even hinting back to the amazing heavenly encounter discussed in 2 Corinthians 12. 2. John's out-of-body experiences in Revelation. On at least 3 occasions, John records being carried away by God in the Spirit in Revelation 4:2, 17:3, and 21:10. These encounters almost always include visual and auditory experiences, many of which could not be described except through the use of allegorical symbols such as horns, eyes, numbers, and so on. While the case of John is not as strong as Paul's, one can still adduce that John experienced some kind of surreal out-of-body experience as the contents of Revelation were being communicated to him. 3. Jesus' promise to the thief on the cross. The third and final proof text does not come as means of one indicating one's personal NDE, but rather it's a promise describing the spiritual life that continues after death. While hanging on the cross, one of the criminals begged forgiveness and asked Jesus to remember him when he entered his heavenly kingdom. Jesus responded by saying, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise," as found in Luke 23:43. Jesus promises the thief that he would consciously enter the heavenly kingdom immediately following his death. To deny a continued spiritual existence as illustrated by NDEs would actually make Jesus a liar. In conclusion, NDEs impact the nature of religion and philosophy in 4 powerful ways. 1, it serves as evidence for God. If NDEs are true, then the numerous encounters that people have had with God further serve as evidence for his existence. Most people who have an NDE describe how the experience drew them closer to God and caused some who were previously skeptical to begin a new life of religious devotion. Some NDE deniers claim that NDEs are the work of the devil. Well, if so, the devil is an extremely poor tactician, since people almost always draw closer to God after their NDE encounter. 2, it serves as evidence of an afterlife. If NDEs are true, then they provide evidence that life continues after death. Heavenly encounters provide just a foretaste of the glorious beauty that awaits a person subsequent to their passing. Even though people may still have some anxiety at death, as the experience is new, the fear involved with death quickly loses its impact when considering the numerous reports of serenity and love felt in that heavenly dwelling. 3, it serves as evidence for the conscious immaterial soul. If NDEs are true, then they serve as additional proof for the existence of a person's conscious immaterial soul. A person cannot be said to be exclusively a body, but rather he or she has a part of their being that transcends the physical world. This is to be expected since God is spirit. We find that in John 4:24, and made us into his image, as we find in Genesis 1:27. And lastly, it serves as a defeater of materialism. The fourth deduction follows from the third. If NDEs are true, and human beings possess a conscious, immaterial soul, then materialism, the idea that the material world is all that exists, is most assuredly falsified. There is much more that we could say about NDEs, but for now I hope that our journey together has revealed the amazing hope that we have in the life beyond death. I hope corresponding with the gospel of Jesus Christ, about whom we read in Acts 4:12, salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. That truth leads us to the assurance, as one person quipped, when we are born, we begin to die, but when we die, we truly begin to live. Again, I'm Brian Chilton with KPOL and Contact Mission.